One. I love that they do a countdown on here. Hi, I'm Kelly Morgan, and the Fab Friday First Draft Facebook Live call broadcast, and I see we have some people with us today. You might want to say hello and who you are so I can know who's here. I would love that. And I have with me today Barbara, Jaffe?
Jaffe,
Yeah, I realize I haven't said your last name very much. We were trying to figure it out at least 10 years ago at the Bodhi Tree in West Hollywood when you were in the Artist's Way workshop.
Yes.
And Barbara is a professor of, is it English literature or English writing?
English writing competition. I just retired.
Hi, Sarah Fenton Vance. Yes, hooray for alliteration. That's one thing I'm good at, being a poet. So glad you're here, Sarah. Anyone else, if you want to check in and say hi before we get going, because I'd love, if you have any questions for Barbara, to ask them of her. And if you could just start off, Barbara, telling us a little bit about yourself and mostly about the book and why you were motivated to write this.
Okay, good.
And the name of the book, too.
Yes. Okay. The name of my book is When Will I Be Good Enough? A Replacement Child's Journey to Healing. And I've always been a writer, and I've always written, and I've always known that I wanted to write a book. One of my favorite things to do would be to go to the library and just look at the books and just dream of having my name on anything to do with writing, and especially nonfiction and memoir. And so I knew that I wanted to write, but I didn't know exactly on what. So I would write a lot of little pieces, and then eventually what kind of turned into what was chapter 2 was a little bit about my experience as a replacement child. A replacement child is a child who's born after a sibling dies in order to replace them. I know no one can ever be replaced, but that is the technical term of that. And so much of my growing up years was related to that, but I didn't know it. So it was always under the surface. And in my writing, I would always do the morning pages as per your wonderful suggestion. And so much came up through those pages that I decided that I would expand on this short piece of writing, which turned into be 20-something pages. But I was never the kind of writer or author that knew exactly the trajectory of what chapter was going to be next and how it was going to end. I really had to, as you would always say, trust the process and let the writing unfold. And that's exactly what I did by and eventually writing my book over the course of a couple years.
First, I just want to welcome Mona Lisa Lynn and Dinah's Art, and thank you for coming today. And what I'm hearing you say, Barbara, is that, well, you're talking about trust the process, and you're also talking about not letting yourself get stopped, that you weren't telling the story in order, that you allowed yourself, you allowed the story to come through in the order that it was presenting itself to.
Absolutely. And so many times I would sit down at the computer and I wasn't exactly sure where it was going to go. And I had to just remind myself to trust the process and also to give myself the ability to write, if it's going to be not great writing, that it was okay. Just to stop that little voice that said, well, this isn't going to be good, or I don't know where this is going, just to be able to sit and write. And that's really how it unfolded. That, along with the idea that I did not have to write a huge amount, a huge chunk of my writing at any one time. That really freed me.
Yeah. Hello, Robin. I just want to welcome you to the broadcast. Did you ever, I hear that it freed you just to write without judging yourself. And did you ever, at any point in the process then, after you got all that together, make a first draft, go back and or a first outline? like get an order? How did you do that? How did you get the order in your head after you'd done all that kind of writing?
That's a really good question. What I did for me, because I love to print things out and kind of look at them, so I did that for a while. But mostly, because I always like to have a hard copy and I read it out loud to myself, much like
I lost you, Barbara. Are you still there?
I'm still here. I'm still here.
Barbara?
Yep, I'm here.
Let's see. Hi, everybody. If you have any questions, you might want to put them down for Barbara. I've lost her, and I'm going to try to see if I can get her back. Hi, Barbara. You're not showing. Did your internet die? And can you come back on? And then I see in the Artist's Way, it says, that's how George R. Martin writes. He trusts in the process and just lets it flow. Are you back, Barbara?
I'm back.
Oh, thank you. There, good. So I love modern technology, but sometimes it's a pain too.
It doesn't work. It's surely a pain.
Yeah, I was just reading a comment from The Artist's Way, which is how someone said, that's how George R. Martin writes. He trusts in the process and just lets it flow. He never plans it out. He just lets it come to him. I don't know who George R. Martin is. So if you wrote that comment, I'd love to hear more. And then Sarah Fenton Vance says, I was chatting with Liz. Hi, Liz. I hope you hear this later about how both of us have a tendency to create in fits and starts. Routine and consistency is a challenge in all aspects of our lives. Not just in their writing, but in their work, family, and friends. And Barbara, what have you found effective for people who are resistant to writing and maybe doing this in a lot of areas in their life? How did you stay consistent?
Well, that's a great question. And I gave myself permission not to be consistent, but to just whatever I could do. As a writing instructor, there was no way that I could write after a full day of reading everybody else's writing. So for me, I woke up extra early in the morning and I wrote for maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes at max. And not every day, but a lot of the days, because I decided that I at first was going to wait until the semester was over and that I had a chunk of time to write. But someone had said, why wait until, months from now? You should start now, even if it's 15 to 20 minutes a day. So once I gave myself permission to write just a short amount of time, sometimes it could have been a paragraph. And one paragraph leads to another, and there before you know it, I had a draft of the book. And again, I didn't do an outline of the book. I just wrote what seemed to come after the last page that I wrote about.
Mm. Yeah, I can really relate to what you say. After I've been doing a lot of reading of other people's work, whether they're students or just reading a book that I love, I don't feel like writing. Excuse me. Wait, I don't want to say that's always true. Sometimes I'm inspired to sit down and write because I like the writing.
Sure.
But other times, it's the end of the day. So do you find the morning was your best time to write?
I found that the morning was my best time to write because I was completely clear, and it was a gift I gave myself just to focus on my own writing before I opened my brain and my mind up to everybody else's writing and reading. So that was very helpful. And then occasionally I would take a long weekend and I would take myself away on a little writing workshop just by myself. And I would sleep, I'd wake up and I'd write, and then I'd give myself an artist date where I'd take a walk somewhere and just be out in nature. And then I would come back and write some more.
I love that. I love the idea of getting out in nature. Now, I just want to look over at the comments because I lost them. And I had them before, and I just want to get them back. And I don't want you to think I'm not listening, everybody. How do I get the comments back? Anyone know? See, oh, there they are. Okay, good. I just wanted to see how you did that. So yes, I love the idea about the combination of a half hour, and then you took weekends off. And I hear that you went out in nature too. Is nature something that inspires you?
Yes, I love to be around water. I like to be around fountains if I can't be around water. I love to be around trees, greenery, and then I just walk for a while. And sometimes I'm inspired with ideas that come into my head while I'm walking. Then I come back fresh and I sit down with tea or coffee and I start writing again. Again, I think it's being gentle with myself, not having any rules and regulations that I have to get something done at a certain time, so many pages.
Yeah, you didn't get the whip out.
No.
So I think I ran a program for a while called Daily Inspired Writer. And the idea was people would commit to writing and they would write in the mornings and then they would put a check mark in to say that they had done it. And the idea would be that you'd be part of a group. And I found that it didn't really work. And I was thinking that, and I want to get your opinion on this. One of the reasons it didn't work is you have to have motivation and it has to be strong. You have to know your why. Is that the case for you? Can you talk about that? How did you stay motivated?
I felt that writing my book was a very spiritual experience and it felt really great. Once I gave myself permission not to have to write all the time, or when I had other things going on that I could take a break, it made me even more motivated. The motivation was intrinsic, right? It was nobody telling me that I had to do it at a certain time. And I think for me, that was very helpful. When I know that I have a piece of writing to do, I get very inspired. What's harder for me to do is that I want to write, but I don't know what to write about. But ironically, the only way to know what to write about is to start writing and things bubble up.
Right?
Yeah.
I said that to somebody once and they said, well, but wait a minute, you're telling me to write, I need to write. Yes.
It's true. I used to tell my students who are developing writers who often aren't very strong writers just because they haven't written, and they say, I have nothing to write about. You know, Flannery O'Connor said anybody who survived childhood has enough information to write a lifetime on, right? So I would say just write. I'd give them prompts. I'd say just write about the fact that you have literally nothing to write about. And from that often will bubble up something.
And I noticed too that you talk about just writing and then it will bubble up what you want to write about. Once you got on this topic of being a replacement child, which is something that I'm going to imagine that you thought about for a long time, or occurred to you through writing, was that motivating? I mean, you said yes, once you have the topic, but what was it that you wanted to discover? You said it's a spiritual journey.
It was really about discovering myself. I think from the outside looking in, nobody kind of knew some of the issues that I was dealing with, but I often felt like a salmon swimming upstream, that I knew things were harder for me than maybe somebody else, and I didn't quite know why. So by doing I liken my book to an onion where you're just kind of peeling the layers. So I'm taking myself apart, I'm examining the pieces, and then I'm putting myself back together actually in a more beautiful way than it was originally, because I was able to observe all the different pieces that didn't quite fit, and that now see fit in.
Yeah, if I was to think of a metaphor, I remember a story about someone who took apart a camera and they laid it out on the table and then they put it back together again, and in a better way. And that's almost, or with some machine. And that's what I'm hearing you say about working with yourself.
And yes, that's really what the journey was, really about the areas of self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence that had been limited by the way in which I saw myself as a replacement child. And it was
let me read what Sarah says, and then I have more questions. Sarah says, sounds like you found things that really work for you. Gentleness, on yourself is a key part of the process. And she says, I know I've come up against the story that I've internalized that I'm not really a writer. Don't have a consistent writing practice. What mantras or affirmations or philosophies or stories do you tell yourself to show up on the page? And I had more comment, but let's talk about that first.
Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, I wrote an article. I write for Psychology Today, and one of the articles I've written is that I am a writer. It seems to be in our culture, we say that we're writers only if we're published, which is so not true. All of us are writers when we write. And I think once we allow ourselves permission to write, whether it's one sentence or one paragraph, we're writing. And it's such a wonderfully creative process. So that's what I would say. Just write a sentence. Sometimes I'm inspired by a quote. Write the quote down. Respond to the quote. I think the hardest thing about being a writer is to actually sit down and write. And that's, sometimes the writing process, it can be in the shower. It can be on a walk. It doesn't have to be at our computer.
Yeah, that's why, and I just want to put this in, I developed the improvisational writing with the idea that we write in class and then people just reflect back what they've heard. And Sarah, because you've been in there, how important that is to you gaining confidence as a writer. And then the very advanced writers really start to understand what is interesting to an audience, and what they might have thrown away is actually very interesting. I want to go on to, I feel like I know what to do, but my internal obstacles get in the way, just like success with dieting or an exercise routine or staying organized. Yeah. So that just kind of relates more to what you're saying. Yeah, I see a lot of correlations if we were to use dieting as a metaphor. I have not found that necessary. I mean, for a while, this outside discipline will work, but in a sense, you have to start to tune into when you're really hungry and eat from that place. If you're ever really going to eat in a way that's feels good. And I hear using this metaphor, can you relate it to what you were saying earlier about writing or not? I mean, maybe it doesn't apply.
I think so. I think so much of it is really about self-sabotage. And the second I use the word diet, I get hungry, right? And yeah. Right. And I just think to explore the idea of writing by say, I am a writer, and no matter what I write is going to be good enough. Just like if I mess up and don't eat well one day, well, I can start again the same day, just later in the day, or I can start again tomorrow. But I think it's all of the rules and regulations we put on ourselves that limit ourselves, whether it's dieting, whether it's writing, whether it's any kind of activity that we do. And
I was thinking too, this thing of hunger. I hear that you had a spiritual hunger, a place inside yourself that felt, I don't know if unsettled is too big of a word, but a place inside of you where there were a lot of questions and that were eating away at your confidence, and that you wanted answers for, and that by doing this kind of writing, you found some answers.
Writing, been searching my entire life in various ways, whether it's, when I was at the Bodhi tree and metaphysical writings and workshops and classes and psychics and a variety of things. But I had to internalize this process. And for me, writing is the way in which I do that. It's the way I discover and question things about the world and about myself. And I think for most writers, it is that way.
Yeah. Certainly that's been most of my process. So anything else where can we get your book? First of all, on Amazon, I know. but
it would be great if you went onto my website, because then you can see a lot of the writing that I do, my interview, as well as a link to get my book on Amazon. My website is barbaraannjaffe.com. BARBANNJAFFE.com. You can get it on Amazon. It's When Will I Be Good Enough? A Replacement Child's Journey to Healing.
Awesome. And any more, I want to look out at the audience. Any more comments, questions? Anyone else want to have any other questions for Barbara? Okay, I don't see anyone else having come on since we started. And I really appreciate you coming and talking about this. This is so close to my heart, Barbara, this idea of going on a spiritual journey by writing about it. And this idea that we're not, you know, why do we have to be a writer, you know, as a job? And that what we have to write is just as important, whether or not we're officially a writer or whether or not we're published. I think that's so important. And I would thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And just one final statement. I think in my life, in many ways, I've always felt less than. And this book is not for people who are just replacement children. It's for anyone who's felt less than, at least in any area of their lives.
Yeah, that seems like too narrow of a definition, because really it's the stories that we tell ourselves inside about what something means. And when we take them out and put them on the table and put them back together, it's about putting them back together as a way of coming to confidence about it and a resolution about it and feeling good about yourself.
Right.
Is that
yes, I've always looked at a tapestry, and from the front, it's so beautiful, right? I mean, sometimes you turn it around and you see the threads are kind of mismatched or tied in a certain way, but that's what makes it very unique and special. So it's almost like a tapestry, but you're able to look at the back as well. That's how
I love that. I love that. A tapestry, and you can look at the back as well as the front. Ooh, that's delicious. The last thing that I just want to say is, for anyone who's interested in writing the way that Barbara is talking about, I'm teaching improvisational writing classes. We literally come online like this. We write together. We reflect back what we're hearing. It's a safe, nurturing group. So you might also want to check my website, creativelife.com. And I usually have a new one starting up at some point, so definitely check that. Any last comments from anyone in the audience, Barbara, or we're never finished? Can we let go of this dialogue for now?
Thank you, Kelly, so much.
Thank you, Barbara, and I hope to talk to you more.
Absolutely.
Okay, bye.
Bye.